Bethlehem was small, so small most didn't even notice it, but God always sees what the world ignores. In the house of Jesse, there were strong sons, tall, soldiers, royal-looking, but they weren't the reason the prophet Samuel came. God had sent him to find a king no one expected. "Are these all your sons?" Samuel asked. Jesse hesitated. "Well, there's the youngest. He's out with the sheep. He wasn't even invited to the table. But God sees the field. God sees the forgotten. And heaven was already watching a dirt-covered boy with a different kind of heart." David, alone with the sheep, singing to God when no one listened, killing lions with his bare hands, learning courage, far from the spotlight. That's where the warrior was born. Samuel called him in. When David walked in, still smelling of the field, the prophet trembled. "This is the one. Anoint him." Oil flowed down his head, and in that moment, something invisible shifted. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, but no one understood. He didn't become king that day. He went back to the field, because calling isn't about the throne, it's about the heart. And David's heart was after God's own. The field had taught David to listen, but war would teach the world to listen to David. Israel trembled, not before armies, but before one man, Goliath, taller than any soldier, stronger than any wall. His armor gleamed like forged thunder. His voice boomed like a curse. "Choose a man to fight me. If he wins, we become your servants. But if I win," silence answered, because no warrior wanted to be buried as national shame. David arrived at the camp, carrying bread and cheese, just a servant sent by his father to feed his brothers. But what he heard burned in his chest. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine who dares to defy the armies of the living God?" The soldiers laughed, called him a boy, arrogant. Even his own brothers rebuked him. But God doesn't see as man sees. David didn't look at the size of the sword. He looked at the faithfulness of God. "The same God who delivered me from the lion and the bear will deliver me from this Philistine." And so, before the king, the boy refused armor, refused swords, refused everything the world called protection. He went down to the brook, and with a shepherd's hand, chose 5 smooth stones. 5, not because he doubted God would hit with the first, but because faith also prepares. Goliath mocked, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? Come, and I'll feed your flesh to the birds of the air." But David replied with words sharper than blades, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel's armies, whom you have defied." He ran, no fear, no hesitation, and while the giant moved with weight and arrogance, David moved with clarity and purpose. One stone flew, guided by something greater than aim, and the sound it made when it struck Goliath's forehead was the sound of pride collapsing. Israel roared, fear became fire, but in the middle of the crowd, only one boy breathed calmly because he already knew the ending before the battle began. David held Goliath's sword in his hands, but he didn't let victory corrupt him. While others cheered him as a hero, he quietly returned to play the harp in the palace. He still served, still waited, still trusted. But eyes were watching. Saul, the king rejected by God, saw in David what he had lost: favor, courage, divine presence. Jealousy grew like a storm inside him. One day, as David played music, Saul hurled a spear at him, not a metaphor, a real attempt to kill him. David escaped. He didn't retaliate. He didn't try to seize the throne by force. He ran. In the cave of Adullam, the anointed became a fugitive, the chosen, rejected by men, the brave, hiding among rocks. But he wasn't alone. From across the land came broken men, in debt, distressed, rejected. And around David, an army formed. Out of outcasts came warriors, because true leadership isn't built with crowns, but with heart. Even when David had chances to kill Saul, he didn't. "I will not touch the Lord's anointed." He knew the throne would be his, but not by ambition, by promise. And that faith sustained him in caves, forests, and silence. David never touched the throne, but the throne already recognized him. He didn't need a crown to be king. His actions, his humility, his courage were already shaping history. But Saul, consumed by jealousy, would not rest. He sent troops to hunt David like a criminal, yet David didn't run out of fear, he ran out of honor. He knew the throne given by God wasn't seized by force, but inherited by faithfulness. For years, David lived as an exile in his own land, hiding in caves, sleeping under stars, exiled among enemies. He waited, and every night of waiting was a stone in the foundation of the king he was becoming. But God hadn't forgotten him. Even among the Philistines, David grew in wisdom. He won battles, led men, protected the weak. He became a refuge for the rejected, hope for the hopeless. An army formed around him, not of trained warriors, but of transformed men. His leadership wasn't forced, it was inspired. One silent night, Saul entered a cave, unaware that David was inside. David's men held their breath. "This is your moment," they whispered. "Kill him, the throne is yours." But David didn't move. He only cut a piece of Saul's robe. Later, from a distance, David cried out, "Look, I could have taken your life, but I did not harm the Lord's anointed." Even Saul wept. But not all tears come from repentance. The chase continued. Until one day, the news arrived. Saul is dead, killed in battle. His son Jonathan too. Tragedy had cleared the way, and the shepherd boy now became king. But before ascending the throne, David mourned deeply, because he never wanted Saul's death. He wanted reconciliation. He knew the throne God builds doesn't begin with revenge, it begins with tears. David finally sat on the throne, the rejected shepherd, the fugitive, the unexpected, now crowned, celebrated king of all Israel. But the throne, contrary to what most think, doesn't elevate. It reveals, because the greatest battle of a king is not against giants, but against his own heart. In the early years, David was everything the people hoped for, and more. He won wars, united tribes, brought back the Ark of the Covenant. He danced before the Lord with such freedom that even his wife despised him. But David knew, it's better to look foolish before men than to be cold before God. Yet even the strongest grow weary, even the chosen do stumble. And on an ordinary afternoon, when kings went to war, David stayed home, and there on the palace rooftop, the man after God's own heart fell. He saw Bathsheba, and a glance became desire. Desire became action, and action became sin, followed by lies, death, and silence. The king had become guilty. But God did not abandon him. He sent the prophet Nathan, and Nathan didn't bring praise. He brought confrontation. He told a parable, then pointed a finger. "You are that man." And in that moment, David broke. He didn't justify. He didn't blame. He didn't run. He simply fell to his knees and wept. "I have sinned against the Lord." And right there, between tears and repentance, something was born that no crown could ever give: a restored heart. David didn't escape the consequences, but he found something greater than judgment, mercy. He wrote Psalms, not to hide his failure, but to remind us that grace is greater than guilt. "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." Psalm 51. The shepherd boy became a king, the warrior became a poet, the fallen became a witness. And to this day, his name echoes not because he was perfect, but because he always came back to God. David died old, full of days, but his story didn't end with him, because one day, centuries later, from his lineage would rise another king. A king who wouldn't slay giants with stones, but would conquer sin with a cross. A king who wouldn't fall into temptation, but would surrender out of love. A king who would also be anointed, rejected, pursued, but who would overcome death forever. Jesus, the Son of David, the true eternal King. And so the story that began in a field ended in heaven, yet still echoes in every heart that chooses, like David, to chase after God with everything.